Go to your mat. Go to your bed.
Hey, Quarantrainers! Today I got to do something that I rarely ever get to do on the job, which is teach an animal a pretty much pointless trick. Typically at the shelter, we're working with animals with debilitating fear issues or having trouble coping with daily life, but today I'm teaching MommaDog to jump through my arms like a hoop. I'm starting off sitting by a wall and my leg is extended with my foot touching the wall. The leg should act as a hurdle for MommaDog to step over. I'm pretty much waiting for her to step over, but if she doesn't step over right away, I point with my hand, and because she follows my hand so easily, she walks over my leg. Now, the reason that MommaDog follows my hand so readily is because we've already worked on touch from the Quarantraining week 2 videos about leash walking. So we've already worked on touch. If you want to start touch with your animal, you can check out those videos, and that might be a nice precursor to this one. So I'm gradually fading out any movements of my hand over time because the idea is that I won't have my hands free when I eventually want to ask her to jump through my hoop, because my hands will be helping to make that hoop. The idea is for her to just go over my leg without my hands moving much at all.
Good job. Very nice. Very good. Excellent. 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 Good job, MommaDog. Excellent.
Here I'm continuing to fade any movement of my hand to get her to go over. You might notice that she has a lot less trouble going from my right to my left than from my left to my right. And I really believe that it's because Fox is stationing there and she doesn't want to jump into his space. So I find myself having to use more of a hand movement to get her to go into his direction. The other way around, she doesn't seem to have a problem.
Good job, huh?
Okay, at this point she's pretty fluent, so I've started putting my arm over my leg, just resting it there lightly, and the idea is for my arm to eventually become the hurdle rather than the leg. I train the initial going over the hurdle with my leg just because it'd be much more difficult on my back to do it over my arm for so long while she learns to go over the hurdle. So leg is easier to do first, and once she's going over my leg really easily, I start gradually fading in my arm. The idea is for my arm to be close enough to the wall for my fingers to be touching it. So you can see I'm just gradually moving my fingers closer and closer to the wall.
Very nice. Good job, Mama. Good girl. Good job. Go to your bed.
This can be a big change for dogs, but MommaDog doesn't seem to have a problem with it.
Good. Very good, Mama. Oh, goodness gracious. You wanted that.
Okay, here I'm going to make a big change, which is taking my leg away, and now my arm is the only hurdle, and she doesn't have a problem with it. I'm pretty excited about that, considering this is a huge change for her.
Good.
I've got to sit a bit closer to that wall because leaning over there is not going to be good for my back.
Good. Good job, Mama.
Okay, so now I'm going to start to form my hoop by raising my right arm up over where my left arm is, nowhere near touching my hands together, Just holding it up out of the way. It's just a little change for her to get used to. And I'm going to work on gradually bringing my fingertips closer and closer together. Now here I actually do it, but I don't think MommaDog's ready. She's trying to get around my hoop. It's really important to just move at the pace of the animal that you're training. If you move too quickly, it can result in a lot of frustration for the animal and the trainer. My next step is getting up on my knees as I'm getting ready to make my way up into the standing position. I want to do that really slowly and make sure that I have a lot of successes at each level of difficulty before getting on to the next step. I'm also gradually working on closing my hoop, which is a tough jump for MommaDog. You can see she's having a bit of trouble. Still much easier jumping away from Fox than it is to jump towards him.
Yes, good job. Yes, good job. Yes, good job.
All right, so this is my second training session with MommaDog today. I had 2 10-minute training sessions. Well, 2 fewer than 10-minute training sessions. And when I started the second one, I reduced my criteria for success. So I went back to sitting on the ground, and I didn't have my hoop fully formed. And I just quickly moved up the levels until I got to the point where I could close my hoop and I was up on my knees again. Because every time you start a new session, you've got to expect that the animal will perform less well. I'm working on moving further and further away from the wall so that it becomes less of a crutch, and she's doing splendidly.
Yes.
Now I think that I'm ready to use the verbal signal through, but I make kind of an error here. Ideally, you should use the verbal signal first before you show your visual cue.
Yes.
So I should say through and then show my hoop. I think this next one's a good one. I was probably just so excited that I didn't do it right. But you will. Oh, I just cannot get the right timing there to when to ask her to do the behavior. That's something that's really critical, is figuring out when the right time to cue a behavior is. If you cue it at the wrong time, the animal's going to get mixed up. All right, so I'm getting on my feet here, working on standing. Still working on when to cue her. I think I've got to have her coming straight on to me before I cue her. That's the ideal.
Good job, MommaDog. Good girl.
I also realize that as I'm standing up here and leaning over, my hair is totally in the way. Really sorry. I'm going to make an update video about this later this week, and I'll put my hair up, I promise. I was so excited that MommaDog did this well with fewer than 20 minutes of training. I hope that you have the same amount of success with your animal. Please, please, please post your response video of your training and your questions below. Until then, happy quarantraining.
Nice.